Welcome back to Coast Comic Con. My name is Kevin White. With me right now, our keynote speaker for today. He's the founder and chief executive officer of Boom Studios. Ladies and gentlemen, Ross Richie.
Hey.
Hey, Ross.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me. So, I love the Coast to Coast Comic Con. It's the only comic book convention that takes place in comic book stores. And I love comic book stores. They're incredible places where readers discover new worlds every Wednesday. Before I fell in love with comic books, I discovered the world of science fiction. My father used to show me old episodes of the original Star Trek TV show. And then when I got older, I fell in love with Star Wars. Back then, there were very few science fiction TV shows and fewer movies, and I was too young to be able to read most classic science fiction books. But comic books came out every month, and there were dozens of different series that I could jump into. I discovered science fiction in the Legion of Superheroes, Fantastic Four, and the X-Men, and soon I'd fallen in love with superheroes. And I never looked back. It started to dawn on me that you could do anything in comic books. You could tell any kind of story. You didn't have to have spaceships and laser guns and cool-looking aliens. There was something special that was happening in comic books. It's not passive like film and TV, where you sit back and you just absorb something. You have to imagine a comic book story yourself, so it's more like a traditional novel. And we all have an opinion about what Batman's voice sounds like. And with all the different actors that are cast in the role, from Adam West to George Clooney to Ben Affleck, if you've read a Batman comic book, no one needs to tell you what his voice sounds like. You already know. What happens between the panels of a comic book is how the story comes alive. It's a totally unique experience. When I went to college, I'd date a girl and they'd get interested in my interest in comic books, and I'd want to share with them this thing that I loved. But maybe this girl didn't like laser guns, or maybe she thought that Batman was too goth for her. But there wasn't much else for people like that to read. And it always struck me that we had so much untapped potential for other kinds of stories. We needed to make comic books that went beyond superheroes and the science fiction things that I loved. Nowadays, that's changing. Series like Monstrous and Saga have huge female fan bases. Characters like Batgirl and Batwoman that were an afterthought when I was a kid growing up are now a movement. And if you'd have told me back then that Marvel Comics would have a hit series on its hand with a character called Squirrel Girl, I would have told you that you're insane. We've had a lot of success at Boom with Giant Days, a story about 3 female college roommates who talk, argue, and do ridiculous things. And the Lumberjanes are taking over the world. We're seeing award-winning, emotionally touching work like this one summer, but it's not just women that are coming into comics and taking to the medium. Kids are reading comic books too, for the first time in decades. When I started Kaboom, our all-ages imprint, people told me, kids don't read comic books. We proved them wrong. Kids are reading comic books again. We've sold over 1 million copies of Adventure Time through our Kaboom imprint. Kids are reading comics, women are reading comics. Pretty soon, everyone's going to be reading comics. And all of this is happening because of you. You're the front line in this revolution of the imagination. You're the audience that's discovering these new stories. And what's exciting about all of this is the next chapter in the evolution of the history of the comic book art form. It's a new golden age. 4 decades ago, comic books were all over. They were in drugstores, they were in grocery stores, they were in newsstands, but that system collapsed. And the comic book stores sprung up to save this wonderful form of expression. Comic book stores rescued comic books from disaster. But what happened was that while comic book stores saved this special medium from disappearing and getting lost, it also kind of tucked it away and made it a bit of a secret. Comic book shops became a secret club. Now, with comic book material taking over the world and Marvel and DC TV shows and movies and things like The Walking Dead, everyone is curious about our little world. Our secret club isn't a secret anymore. Just this past month, we announced a new graphic novel called Jane that's a retelling of the story of Jane Eyre in the modern day. and it's created by the co-creator of the TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Our vice president of marketing showed this announcement to his mother. And do you know what she said? For the first time in the 10 years that this guy's been working in the comic book industry, she got interested in reading a comic book. Now, you can't find anybody in your life that hasn't seen a movie, and you can't find anybody in your life that hasn't watched a TV show or read a book. But you can find people who've never read a comic book. So why don't we change that? Here's my challenge. Find someone and give them a comic book to read. It could be a sister, a brother, your best friend, a cousin. Maybe it's your mom. Don't hand them your favorite superhero. Okay, if you're watching The Flash on the CW together, you can do that. But listen to them first. What do they like? What are their interests? And then make a recommendation along the lines of the series of the things that they love. Our desire at Boom is to find new comic book readers. And we've done it with Lumberjanes, Power Rangers, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Giant Days, and the WWE comics. It's our passion. So let's do this together. Let's spread the word. Let's not keep this wonderful world of comic books as our little secret. If everyone got a single person, a relative, a friend, to buy a single comic book or graphic novel, the number of people reading comic books would double overnight. If each one of us did our part and helped one more person to read a comic book together, we could change the popularity of this thing that we love in a very short amount of time. Now, we're about to hear presentations from some of the greatest comic book creators in the business. People like Jim Lee and Matt Kent, Kieran Gillen, Paul Levitz, Dan Slott, Charles Soule. I'm naming just a few of the people that are going to present today. And other publishers like DC, Marvel, Image, Boom. As you listen to these presentations, maybe you can think of someone you know who could be excited to read about some of the new comic books that are being presented today. If you get somebody to read a comic book who's never read one before, share it with the hashtag #DiscoverComicBooks. Tell everybody your story. And together, we can tell the world about this thing that we love. Thank you.
Ross, thank you so much, brother.